behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Team Gāthās, I welcome you to this session of JLF's Brave New World Voices of Faith series, where we listen into discussions, analysis, and theories of the various philosophies that form the foundations on which most of our religious, spiritual, and mystic beliefs are based. The series is presented by the Kamani and Vindi Banga Family Trust. Our session today is the faith and philosophy of Zoroastrianism. Noshir, Dadrawala, and Shernaz Cama in conversation with Dinyar Patel. Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest living world religions, developed over 3,000 years ago. A session which takes us on an illuminating journey through the Gāthās and their poetic power, the powerful oral traditions, and the importance of positive action and spiritual healing that has been at the very heart of the foundation of the faith. Please join us in viewing a short film produced by Parzor.
Prophet Zarathustra was born around 1600 BC in Central Asia. In a Bronze Age setting, he taught there was only one God, Ahura Mazda, Lord of light and wisdom. In his Gāthās, he spoke of choice available to man between the creative spirit Spenta Menu and the spirit of destruction and anger, Angra Menu or Ahriman. For Zoroaster, the name given to him by the ancient Greeks, the physical and mental worlds are interrelated through the seven Amesha Spentas or guardians who create balance and harmony in both the physical and spiritual realms. This harmony is best represented in a later symbol of Zoroastrianism, the Farohar or Fravashi, which combines wings soaring upwards to the divine with the figure of man. In this symbolic representation, man holds a ring, a covenant to work with the good spirit to overcome negation and create perfection.
Today we have Noshir Dadrawala, the CEO, Center for Advancement of Philanthropy, and advises nonprofits and CSR initiatives in India on matters pertaining to compliance and good governance. He also has an abiding interest in the Zoroastrian religion and is an elected trustee of the Bombay Parsi Panchayat. Shernaz Cama teaches at Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi University. Dr. Cama has edited and authored several books. She was invited by UNESCO to initiate the Parzor project for the preservation and promotion of Parsi Zoroastrian culture and heritage, for which she has created international exhibitions and produced movies, an excerpt of which we showed earlier. Conversation today with Dinyar Patel, who is an assistant professor of history at the SP Jain Institute of Management and Research in Mumbai and a research affiliate with the Mittal South Asia Institute at Harvard University. He is also the author of Nauroji, Pioneer of Indian Nationalism. Please do remember to ask questions and comment by typing it into the comment section below, and our colleagues will post these to Dinyar to ask of our speakers today. The session podcast partner is Lanchora. Ladies and gentlemen, we present the faith and philosophy of Zoroastrianism, Noshir Dadrawala and Shernaz Cama in conversation with Dinyar Patel, presented by the Kamani and Vindi Banga Family Trust. Dinyar, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. And we, of course, would like to thank JLF and Teamwork for inviting us for this session. What I will do is give a very brief overview of the history of the religion before we get into question and answers. Now, one of the great difficulties when studying the history of Zoroastrianism is just a lack of sources. For much of its history, Zoroastrianism has been an oral tradition. A lot of sources have been lost over the centuries. And due to limited archaeological work in the region where Zoroastrianism originally thrived, that means a lot of sources probably have not come to light as yet. I mean, our story can really change depending on how archaeological work develops. And so consequently, some of the most critical information is conjecture. I mean, we don't know precisely when or where Zarathustra was alive. I mean, the Greeks thought that he was alive 6,000 years before Plato. It's probably more likely, as the video pointed out, that he was alive sometime in the mid-second millennium BC, somewhere in Central Asia. The Zoroastrian religious corpus itself is in many different languages. You have in Old Avestan the Gāthās, which are commonly believed to be Zoroaster's own words, and the Yasna Haptangaiti. But then you also have sources that are in Young Avestan, Old and Middle Persian, and still more in what we call Modern Persian and Gujarati. And again, the translations of a lot of these texts are contested. If you look at the Gāthās, the translations differ quite dramatically by the individual who's translated it. Now, we know that by the time of the Achaemenid Empire, specifically with Darius I, Zoroastrianism had become closely entwined within the structure of the state in Persia. It became further entrenched in the Parthian and the Sasanian empires. The Sasanian Empire was extant from 224 AD to 651, and through Persian state power and through the Silk Road and through mercantile connections, Zoroastrianism traveled to places like India, Central Asia, China, and parts of the Roman Empire as well. The Arab invasion of Iran, and particularly after what happened after the Battle of Nehevand in 642, brought about the end of this period. But it's important to remember that the conquest of Iran and the Islamization of Iran took a very, very long time to take part. So, I mean, the conquest of Iran and Transoxiana took around 9 decades, and then Islamization of Iran itself took perhaps another 6 centuries, according to one scholar. So Zoroastrianism did not proceed in Iran in one fell swoop. Rather, there was a very long period of interaction between Islam and Zoroastrianism, which lasted until relatively recently. And then, of course, that particular dynamic in Iran led to some Zoroastrians going to India. And I'll just end with this, interesting, a bit of information which shows you again how, what we know about Zoroastrianism can oftentimes be quite surprising. So, I mean, we commonly believe Zoroastrians to arrive in Indian shores as, what we now call Parsis, beginning from the 8th to the 10th century AD, specifically in Gujarat. But actually, the earliest surviving reference we have towards Zoroastrians in India is not in Gujarat. It's rather from Kerala. It's from a copper plate in Kollam, in Kerala, dating from the late 19th century. So, with that, I will transition to, the rest of today's discussion, where we'll be asking each other some questions in order to get a discussion going on elements of Zoroastrianism. So let me begin with a question for Noshir Dadrawala. If you can tell us a little bit about Zarathustra and his life.
Sure. Thank you, Dinyar. First of all, this name, Zarathustra. People, it's quite a tongue twister for non-Zoroastrians. So, I mean, the Greeks referred to him as Zoroaster, but the Avestan name is Zarathustra. That is the actual name. And it has been variously translated as driver of camels, possessor of camels. But if you look at it carefully, the word Zara is golden, is to shine, and Tra is the star. So therefore, his name is translated as shining golden star. As Dinyar rightly said, we don't know when exactly he was born. Modern scholars put him anywhere around 1500 BC. They say he was born in a city called Rai, but this is based upon Pahlavi texts. And if you look at Rai, it's barely 60 kilometers away from the capital city of Tehran. There are some who believe that he was born somewhere in Balkh, which is modern day Afghanistan. Many believe he was born somewhere near the Russian steppes. When he was born, where he was born remains a mystery. but the fact remains that he did walk on planet Earth, because his message is there with us. And his message is loud and clear. Songs, just as we have the Gita, which is the songs, we have the Gatha, which is song. These are songs of Zarathustra in his own words. These are poetic philosophy. And what from the Pahlavi text is that when he was about the age of 30, there are stories of miracles around the time of his birth that, there were evil sorcerers who tried to end his life, and there were several attempts on his life, etc. That's all part of the myth that we find in the text. But the more important part is that he leaves his father's house at the age of 30 in search of the truth. And the Pahlavi text says that he meditated on the truths of nature for a period of 10 years, a mountain called Mount Ushidarena. It was a mountain called Ushidarena, which we geographically don't know where it exists. But that's where he meditated for 10 years. And it is said that he received his first vision. This is according to the Zartushname, which is part of the Dinkad, which is a century Pahlavi text, that it happened to be the month of Ardibesht, which is the current month of Ardibesht now, also as per the Shenshai calendar, on Roj Dep Meher. And it said when he had his first vision of Ahura Mazda, it's a pertinent question to Ahura Mazda. This is what it is documented in Zarathushtrama, where Zarathustra asked the Lord of Wisdom, Ahura Mazda, because that's what Ahura Mazda means, the Lord of Wisdom. We are essentially worshippers of wisdom. Who is the person among all other world? And it seems from the Zarathushtrama that Ahura Mazda had an answer to this. And in this answer, you find encapsulated the entire philosophy of Zarathustra. Ahura Mazda says, the best person is one who walks on the path of Asha. Asha is a Western term, which is variously translated as truth, righteous conduct, and living a life in harmony with nature. Then Ahura Mazda, he or she who is charitable in thought, word, and deed, who reveres the fire, who reveres the waters, who reveres the vegetation, and who respects even animals or takes care of animals. Now you can see that this entire concept of how a Zoroastrian should be living his or her life is in this very first question that Zarathustra seems to have asked Ahura Mazda. It is said that after this, there was a conference that in the court of Ahura Mazda. This is how it has been graphically described, Zarathushtrama, and where all the Amesha spenders, the remaining 6 Amesha spenders, Baman, Ardibesh, Sharevar, Asmandar, Khordad, Amardad, these are seen as guardians of the good creations of Ahura Mazda. So Baman, for example, is the protector of animals. Ardibesh presides over fire. Sharevar presides over metals and minerals. Asmandad is a female deity which presides over earth. Khordad over the waters. Amardad over vegetation. So you can see all the good creation of Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda has his energies looking after that. But the Amesha spenders have also to be looked at from an ethical perspective. And I'll just cover a little bit of that, and then I will complete my answer to this. That essentially, Baman is in Avesta referred to as Vahumana, which is the good mind. Ardibesh is Asha Vahishta, or the best truth or best righteous. Asha Vahishta is about truth. Sharevar is about strength, Shatravairya. Aspanda is about humility and piety. Khordad is Havratat, which is about perfection. And Amardat is about eternity or lifelong. Now, these are the concepts that we have to imbibe as Zoroastrians in our day-to-day life. And this is so important. As human beings, in our day-to-day life, the first concept is Ahura Mazda. Whatever you do it in Ahura Mazda's name, and you dedicate the results to Ahura Mazda. Good, bad, whatever happens, you do your duty in the name of Ahura Mazda, dedicate it to him. You will do it using Baman, which is your good mind. You will do it again with Ardibesh, which is truth, righteous conduct. And this in turn will lead you to Sharevar, which is strength. It will give you strength. But the strength must be combined with Asmandarmad, which is about humility and piety. which will give you Khordad, which is perfection, and which you will have for immortality, that is Amardad. That sense is what Zarathustra was telling us. Dinyar?
Thank you. So let me ask one question for Shernaz. How is an ancient tradition like Zoroastrianism relevant for today?
I think Noshir has touched a little bit upon this, but I think what is most important for me to convey to an audience like this is a Bronze Age religions or faith or cultures concerned with today's issue of ecology. Definitely geography helps create history as well as philosophy, and the whole idea of a cold desert where water and fire create warmth and life is reflected in the word we have for creation, which is spenta creation. Spenta means holy at one level, but it also means bounteous. And of course, we have little legends that which the Greeks have also corroborated, that Zarathustra was the only infant who laughed rather than cried when he was born, because he was so happy to come to this beautiful world of Asha. The point which we have over here is that each one of us is a hamkar or a co-worker, a fellow worker with the Lord of Light and Wisdom, Aura Mazda. And man is a part of the 7 creations, which Noshir has talked about, and therefore he has to live in harmony with all of them. It is not that man has to govern creation, and that is completely out of sync with the idea of harmony and the oneness of all creation. So the other very interesting thing is that Zoroastrianism speaks at that time of pollution, of waste, and of greed. And interestingly, with using psychology, it also speaks of doubt. As opposed to Spenta Menu, we have, as we heard in the little video, Spenta Menu, Spirit of Truth. We have Angre Menu or Ariman, who is negativity. Today, we are looking at negativity, doubt, pollution, waste, all these things. And we are the people responsible to recreate harmony, to bring about the restoration of the world. Zoroastrianism doesn't end with an apocalypse. It ends with a perfected world. So I think that's the positive thrust of this faith. And there's a very important feature in our faith, which is the joy in life. Just as Zarathustra laughed, we have to bring joy to life. And the only way you can bring joy to life is through action, positive action. And I'm quoting from the Gāthās, I have taught that action, not inaction, higher stands. And a later text, the Vendidad, speaks about he who sows corn sows righteousness. Now, so we have to actively participate to protect this oikos, this beautiful world we live in, and bring about Frashokareti. But all this is theory. How do we as practicing Zoroastrians learn about this? I think we learn it from childhood in a very osmotic process. As a child, you are told by your parent, grandparent, don't pluck a flower at night, it is sleeping. And that is something which we all have followed all our lives. And the second thing is that we all are crazy about dogs, which any Parsi friend would know. Anybody who has a Parsi friend would know. But it is a very ancient tradition because we put aside the first morsel without eating it. We put aside the first untasted morsel as what we call the morsel for the dog or the Kutrano book, which is a rivaj, which is a tradition, which is to thank the dog who was our protector and friend on the steppes of Central Asia thousands of years ago. So this is the osmotic way in which we have a living ecology in our faith. That is my first point. The second point is about choice. And again, I think that it's very relevant to our world today because everybody wants freedom, everybody wants choice, but we also have to remember that choice implies responsibility. The Gāthās, again, this is Yashna 30.2. It says, hear with your ears. This is Zarathustra in his songs talking. Hear with your ears the highest truths I preach. And with illumined minds, weigh them with care before you choose which of the two paths you will tread. man to man, each to each, close quotes. Now, what do I mean by choice? In Zoroastrianism, the soul is called the Ruvan. It's spelled with a U, U-R-V-A-N, but it actually means the chooser. The path of righteousness, Asha, or the path of Druj, negation, are both available. You have to choose the path you want to tread. Again, how does orality teach this to us? We choose to join the faith at our Navjot, when we put on the sacred Vaumanik Vastra or the Sadra and the Kasti. We bind the sacred thread together at the word Shothenanam, to act. You may have heard that word repeated in one of the ceremonies you saw over there. We are given the choice, both girls and boys are given the choice at marriage. Do you choose to marry? Pasande kadam. And of course, you have hilarious stories about the groom or the bride jumping off the stage and saying, no, pasande kadam, I don't choose to marry so-and-so. But finally, all our choices in life bring us to the Chinvat Paretu, or the bridge of choice. The bridge of judgment is the bridge about the choices you have made in this life. If you have chosen wisely, as the Gāthās guide you to, you have chosen the positive mentality, and you will therefore act with responsibility. In Zoroastrianism, there is no savior to take away your sins. There is no cycle of reincarnation by which you work out your karma. This is the one life you have. Live it well, live it with joy, and most important, give happiness to others. And that's that little phrase we always use, Ushtate, happiness unto you. And that is the concept with which we live. Just as Zarathustra laughed when he was born, all of us, we pray with joy. We don't pray cringing before God. We don't even have to kneel before God. We stand with our hands upheld. And that is how the Gāthās start. With hands upheld, I speak to you, O Aura Mazda. So we are to be part of this creation, positive creation, and our prayers are more discussions, affirmations, rather than supplication. So this is the way I feel that the religion is very relevant even today. Thank you, Dinyar.
Thank you very much. So I'll just build on the comments that both Noshir and Shernaz mentioned to bring up an important point. I mean, when we look at religion, whenever we study religion, we must remember that religious practice and religious belief changes dramatically over time. Right. And so, any religion which is, 3,000 to 3,500 years old, dramatic change has taken place, as it has within Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, whatever religion you want to look at. But, earlier today, I was just thinking through some things that seem relatively constant within the Zoroastrian tradition. And there are a few things. I mean, for one, God, Ahura Mazda, is fundamentally good. He is not responsible for evil in this world. So, I mean, that's something that distinguishes Zoroastrianism quite a bit from many other religions. I mean, God could potentially be not omnipotent in that particular interpretation. And that was subject to a great amount of debate in the early Islamic era. To give one example, humans are agents of good. So, as Shernaz mentioned, I mean, we are hamkars. We are meant to help God achieve good. And, in our modern society, that, of course, can sometimes seem a little difficult to believe, but that is, a part of our religion. And, I think it really helps us kind of understand what our relationship with God is like. Thirdly, a certain degree of importance has been given to fire in ritual practice, but other elements have also been held to be sacred. Fourthly, particular ideas have held relatively constant. The importance of things like charity. You see charity being an important thing throughout Zoroastrian history. So modern day Parsi philanthropy is not something relatively unique or different. The importance of truth or order or righteousness, asha, and ritual purity. I mean, this is something which Zoroastrianism has in similarity with Hinduism or Shia Islam, for example. And lastly, the Zoroastrian tradition embraces a certain joyousness in life. And this is something that Shernaz mentioned. A certain happiness and joyousness of life is important. In early European accounts that we have of Zoroastrians, whether in India or in Iran, there are some travel writers who've talked about how the Zoroastrians were the ones who had a penchant for festive eating and drinking and merrymaking. It's very evident today. I mean, a distinct type of Parsi humor, and in Iran, there's a distinct type of joy that is conveyed in the culture. So that's something that, again, we can trace back to quite a long period of time. So with that, I would like to ask either Shernaz or Noshir, do you have a question for me?
Yes, I do have a question for you, which is linked to the long history of Zoroastrianism, and people don't realize it. How is Zoroastrianism influenced and been influenced by other faiths?
Yeah. So again, in any religion that has such a long history has obviously had a great degree of influence on other religious traditions. So, I mean, scholars of Islam will talk about transmission of particular Zoroastrian ideas to Islam. Similarly, in Judaism, I know that there have been one or two works out recently that have talked about certain, say, ritual practice that, and ideas that have been borrowed in Judaism. And certainly, in the Jewish tradition, Cyrus is regarded as being a prophet, as somewhat of a savior figure. So you do have some crossover there also. There are many similarities between Zoroastrianism and Hinduism, and many of these similarities go back to the fact that the origins were probably common. Somewhere in Central Asia, Vedic and Zoroastrian traditions grew up either side by side or interacted with one another. And you can tell this just through the similarity of a lot of words that are, employed in both traditions. Christianity, again, the three magi are perhaps the best example of how Zoroastrianism has had some influence on Christianity. But the other side of the coin is something which is not discussed as much. What have other religions done to influence Zoroastrianism as well? And again, religions like Islam have had a very strong influence on Zoroastrian practice as well. I mean, if you look at a lot of the terminology we use, Qibla or Din no Kalmo, these derive from Islamic terms, and perhaps certain forms of practice grew up in reaction or, in some sort of sync to Islam when Islam was introduced to Iran, from the 600s onwards. And certainly once Parsis come to India, Hinduism exerted a great deal of influence on Zoroastrian practice. So, I mean, within our wedding traditions, within many of our customs, there is a very strong Hindu influence. And starting from the 1850s onward, there was an impulse amongst many Parsis to get rid of this and say this is not authentic. And, I really think in many ways that's a mistake. I mean, all religions are to a degree syncretic. There's nothing really like an authentic religion. I mean, when you study religion, that idea of authenticity is one of the first shibboleths to go away. So, I think in many ways we should revel in these similarities and these crossovers that we have between different particular religious traditions.
Do you have a question now, Dinyar?
Sure. So let me, I can perhaps ask this to both of you, since both of you have, I think similar areas of expertise. Are there, any things you can talk about symbolism within the faith, whether it's fire, or whether it is any other particular traditions?
Okay, I'll take off with something, and then I think I'll leave the question about fire. I'll just touch upon it and I'll leave it to Noshir. Basically, the symbols range from the absolute everyday to the most esoteric. I'm going to take as an oral tradition, which is also a tangible tradition, the simplest thing, which I've already mentioned, the Vahumanik Vastra, or the simpler way we use the word, the Sadra. Under all our externals, we wear this white muslin shirt with a tiny little 1-inch square pocket called the Kisse Kerfe or the Gireban, which is placed over our heart, which comes over our heart. It is the garment of the good mind, and we tie around our waist, girls and boys, after their initiation on Navjot, we tie around our waist the Kasti. The Kasti is created it's woven out of 72 threads of lamb's wool. It signifies the 72 chapters of the Yashna, which is our most important and most ancient ritual. But every time we put on the Sadra Kasti in the morning after our bath, or we recite the Kasti at night before going to bed, it is a very simple but very important symbolic reminder of the Yashna ceremony. You saw a brief glimpse of that Yashna ceremony. It is a very intricate ceremony. It's a Proto-Indo-Iranian ceremony, definitely coming out of Central Asia. But it is our most sacred text, and it is our most sacred ritual. Once upon a time, it used to be performed every day by two highly trained priests in the great Athas Vairams across India. In Iran, we've lost it for many, many decades, the entire Yashna. We still have it performed at a few places, at a few times. Now, what does it start with? It starts with two priests going before dawn, just before dawn, to the well, drawing out water, which they then pray over, bless in a place, in a sacred space or temenos, where you have all the seven elements: fire, water, plant, metal, animal, man, and of course the earth. And finally, you recite intricate prayers by heart. You perform very, very important ritual gestures, and you bind together the whole of creation before you take that energized water after hours of recitation and pour it back into the well in sunlight. This act, the yashna, is to enrich and strengthen creation every day. When you tie your kasti, and this I really am aiming at the young Zoroastrians who think it's so unimportant, rituals don't matter. When you tie your kasti or recite your kasti prayers, you are actually enacting the same ritual, which in miniature, using very similar ritual gestures, using very similar words, the avangoya, the tying together. And therefore, I think it's a very important concept, and it's a very simple, apparently simple concept, linking into a much deeper symbolism. Fire, I know that Noshir will talk about, but there's one important thing I want to mention. It combines, it purifies, but that word humility which you use for Spendarmad or Spenta Armaiti, the ultimate fire in the fire temple, the greatest fire temple, will turn to ash. And we put that ash on our forehead to remember that with humility, that all of us, all the fancy things we have, all that we are, this human body turns to dust. I am going to talk about one other symbol which I think needs to be talked about, because people, especially in childhood in Gujarat, people used to whisper behind their hands and talk to us about, oh, how do you dispose of your dead? Okay. And that's the Dakma, or the towers of silence, and sky burial. Sky burial is again part of our ecological consciousness. We do not want to waste precious resources. And it is the soul that is important, not the body. So you don't want to waste wood, you do not want to pollute the earth, you do not want to occupy space. And that is why you offer your body as your last good deed to birds of prey. Let them feast on you, on this body, because it's the soul that is the Ruan, which has already chosen the right path and crossed into Garodamana, that beautiful paradise of flowers, song, and light. So I think these are the symbols which I just have briefly touched upon. I mean, I can talk for hours about this. So with that, I think Noshir, please do talk about the whole concept of fire and that use of that term, fire worshippers.
Thank you, Shernaz. I'll take off from where you have left. Yes, indeed, most people associate Zoroastrianism and Parsis with fire worship. Even the temple at which we a place of worship is referred to a temple. The very Sanskritized term is about Agni, that this is the place where you are, in a sense, revering fire. So as a person, then Firdausi in his Shahnameh speaks about that do not think that they are worshippers of fire. They are the worshippers of Yazdan, which is God, through the medium of fire. So it's kind of fundamentally wrong to think that Parsis or Zoroastrians are fire worshippers. It's akin to saying that Christians worship the cross or Muslims worship the Kaaba. I mean, these are mediums through which, and Zoroastrianism has chosen fire as a medium. As one had once said, through nature, we look up to nature as God. It's just not fire, We pray even before the waters in the month of Ava. We pray before the mountains. There are prayers for every good creation. There is even prayers that you say for the Orvar, which is vegetation. So you could be facing the and praying to the forest and of the forest. So essentially, we are worshippers of nature. And through nature, we look up to nature's God, which is Ahura Mazda, the creator, the benevolent Lord of wisdom. So essentially, why do we consider fire as the icon of worship? As in, we look at fire as a channel or the medium through which we look up to Ahura Mazda. Because first of all, we see fire as the dispeller of darkness. It's the giver of. It's not the dim darkness, but it is dispelling. Because whenever we think even in the terms of concept of evil, evil is the absence of good. In like manner, there is no such thing as darkness. It does not have an existence of its own. You cannot bring darkness to this room when it is lighted. When I will switch off my lights here, there'll be darkness. But once I switch on the lights, darkness has disappeared. This is exactly what we think even about evil. So fire is the light, and most important, it is a giver of life. It animates. You will see that just as you find in the book of Genesis that God created this world, creates the sky, earth. We have a similar concept even in Western texts in the Bundahishan, and we celebrate the 6 Gambars, which are the 6 stages in which Ahura Mazda creates this world. There is no day of the Sabbath. There is no rest. Ahura Mazda does not seem to have taken a rest day. He created the 6 creations, and that was it. And how did it animate? Fire was not it. I believe that it is fire that animated all the 6 creations. And therefore, fire, giver of light, and it's the giver of life. The Amesha Spenta, or the divinity that presides over fire, is Ardibesh. Ardibesh is the force. So when you're praying before a fire, you're asking for that fire energy to energize you. And this is what we are asking of that fire. And these are mental affirmations that you're making. I'm so glad that Shernaz spoke about the importance of prayers, but it's also that you understand your prayer. And you should word for word know the translation, but know the essence of what you pray. We pray before the Atash, a litany, which we refer to as the Atash Nyash. It's in praise of the fire. And we refer as Atash Ahura Mazda Putra. Now, this term is taken 2 ways. They took the Sanskritized verse Putra, meaning that fire is the son of Ahura Mazda. But a scholar like Kavasji Edalji Kanga says Putra is also meaning a purifier, that fire, who is the fire? He purifies all polluted, he purifies your mind, he purifies your thinking. So essentially, fire, it's not about fire worship. It is through fire that we look up to God. And so essentially, if I come down to what it means to be a Zoroastrian, to live a Zoroastrian life, it is, as Shernaz rightly said, we have a choice. We have the choice to choose between right and wrong and good and evil. But what is evil? Or what is not good? This Pahlavi texts speak about. Evil exists at different levels. At the physical level, it is in anything that is polluted, anything that is unclean. So there is the concept of cleanliness is next to godliness is distant. Cleanliness is godliness. Anything that is polluted is moving away from what is good. At the social level, poverty, illness, want, it's a form of evil. And that is why you see Parsis being charitable. The concept of Radhi and Rasti are in the Pahlavi text. Radhi is about truth and Rasti is about truth and Radhi is about being charitable. Ethical level, have all your vices, anger, jealousy, lust, gluttony. These are all defined in the Pahlavi text. At the ethical level, that is the evil. There is at the metaphysical level, the great battle between the forces of good and evil, and your contribution is through your righteous choices that you make and the prayers that you offer. So essentially, I'll repeat this and I will conclude with that essentially what considered as evil, in a sense, does not have an existence of its own. Evil is merely the essence of good. And by choosing good, we diminish evil. And this is a beautiful concept that is found in the Zamya Dyash, in the conclude paragraph, where we are making an affirmation that at the end of time, please understand that this entire universe was created to get rid of Aura Mazda. Sorry, to get rid of Ahriman is what I meant to say. And my apologies. And Yash makes that affirmation that Ahriman, that is the evil one, it doesn't say Ahriman will be vanquished. It doesn't say Ahriman, because you cannot destroy what does not exist. Ahriman will kind of bow out, and goodness, that perfection, that frashokerity that we want, the perfect world will prevail. And that's the affirmation we make in the Zamiyad Yash, which is to the earth itself. So to the earth, we are saying, yes, ultimately, evil will simply bow out and there's action in this world.
Thank you, Noshir.
Thank you.
I'm just going to, before I ask Dinyar to conclude.
Very quickly, because we should take one question before wrapping up. We only have about 4 minutes left.
I'm just continuing what Noshir said, and that is, we need to understand our text. And I'm going to suggest to people to read Dr. Eraj Tarapurwala's translation of the Gāthās, which is called The Divine Songs of Zarathustra. It's a beautiful translation and transliteration, and it brings out word for word plus the poetic meaning. And that's a beautiful thing, which I would recommend people to read. And the other one, of course, is Mary Boyce's great book, Zoroastrians, Their Religious Beliefs and Practices. So with that, my side is over. Dinyar, if you would like to conclude, please go ahead and talk about the diaspora.
So I'm going to take an audience question. So we have one question on the historicity of the Kise Sanjan. So let me explain what this text is first. It's a text which dates, I believe, from 1599. Which gives the account of how the Parsis came to India, the story of Sanjan. They came to this town called Sanjan, which still exists on the Gujarati coast. As to the historicity of it, very good question. I mean, the author of the Kise himself talks about how he's received the story from someone else. So it probably derived from some sort of oral tradition. And there's a certain chronology that's put in place, and this is described quite well. There's a book by Alan Williams, who's a professor in the UK, he's written a book on the Kise Sanjan and done a translation of it, and I'd recommend you take a look at that if you want to learn more. But there's certain types of chronology that are built in over here, that we stayed at this place for 10 years or 100 years, etc., and moved on and on. It's difficult to assign precise numerical values. And to take that at face value, rather, right? That, it's 10 years were elapsed in a place like Diu, or for 100 years, the 2P Parsis lived in a place like Hormuz. So what we can take it, I think the important thing about taking any account like this is it gives us a hint of what the history of the Parsis was like. I mean, yes, there probably was some impulse against religious persecution in Iran. At the same time, we have lots of evidence of migration to India based on networks of commerce and mercantile networks. I mean, that's precisely how we get the first sign of Zoroastrianism, appearing in India and in Kerala. In the 9th century. So, take this with a grain of salt. Archaeological evidence will fill in a lot of the details, additionally to kind of reconstruct the story. So with that, we are pretty much out of time. So I want to wrap up and thank everyone for participating in this particular session, and thank both JLF and Teamworks for allowing all three of us to participate in this discussion. If you want to learn more about Zoroastrianism, there's some great books which Shernaz mentioned, and many others that are available for consultation, and we really encourage you to study up more. So it's a fascinating religion to learn about.
Thank you, Sanjoy. We're very grateful to you for bringing out some part of Zoroastrianism, but 3,000 years to cover in less than an hour is a little difficult. Thank you so much, and thank you, JLF, and all of you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noshir, Dadrawala, Shernaz, Cama, and Dinyar Patel. And many apologies to all of you who've sent in their questions. I know we've been bombarded with them. Unfortunately, Dinyar has run out of time. We are constrained big time. And just to set the context, it's been very interesting over this past few weeks that we've had a number of sessions on Parsi culture, about Parsi food, and around books written by Parsis. And it's come as a spurt. It's one of those accidents that have happened, but we're very enthused about the reaction that we've got from across the world in folks tuning in to sessions around Parsi. So thank you all so much. Thank you to the Kamini and Vindi Banga Family Trust for supporting this series. And of course, do remember that JLF London at the British Library, the digital series will be presented from 24th to the 26th of September. Please do register online on www.london.jlflitfest.org to receive information and to be able to watch the fabulous sessions that are in store for you. We've already recorded a few of them, and they're really, truly worth watching. Don't miss the one that we begin with, which is on Afghanistan. So on that very happy note, thank you all. Have a fabulous day and a fabulous rest of the week. We'll catch up with you on the weekend with JLF at London.